I stopped looking into the forest after my third week of living in the countryside. I learned to keep my eyes on the water right before its shore, trained away from the tree limb like I trained them from a corpse. That's how everyone else coped too. The feeling found us anyway. Nobody talked about it, almost like they were afraid that speaking about it would make it more real. I tried my best to deny it, but I felt it when I looked past the water into the forest beyond. At night, it seemed like an audible hum in the distance. My wife left a few weeks ago. She took the boat by our house and was never seen again. I couldn't convince myself that she was one of the ones who just leave. It's common for those who live far away. That kind of solitary life isn't for everybody. Some people move to towns or cities nearby, others leave to isolate themselves even more and go deeper into the wilderness. We don't usually ask questions when people move out, but I simply couldn't accept that she was one of them, that she would leave without saying a single word. I was still processing the disappearance when, a couple of days ago, nearby travelers came to our small town. I knew that those heading to the city would need supplies for their journey. I left my home in spite of my grief and took the supplies I was willing to trade with. After a few unsuccessful attempts to barter with the visitors, I sat on a stump near a campfire. One of the men was in front of me. He was an older man with a beard and a face full of wrinkles. He was measuring black powder into small bags. "What is it?" I said. "If it's gunpowder, I've got shot and caps." The man didn't take his eyes off the work. "I'm not here to trade," he said. "I thought that's what you folk came here for," I said. "I ain't with the other folk," he said, "and the less time I spend here, the better." I already knew where this was going. The man was a hermit. I could tell by the way he stared at me dead in the eye, oblivious to any social rules. Hermits were a paranoid sort, observant in the wrong way. I knew he was talking about the forest, but I had always been one of the few people to deny the anomaly, which outsiders mention so often. "You don't hear the humming?" he said, ignoring my question. "Or have you just made your peace with it?" I prepared to say no, not really. I wanted to tell him that he was crazy, or that he had been alone for too long, but I was too tired. "Well, I ain't sure, really," I said softly. It was the first time I had been honest about it. "Every time I pass through here, I hear it," he said. "Your people feel the need to enter the forest just the same, and yet you refuse to move away." His words reminded me of something. If someone were to go to those woods, what would happen to them? "Are you thinking of going?" he said. "No, but someone I know is gone." I'm not saying they went to the woods, but if they did, what would happen? How can I say it? He paused. "Some things notice when you're looking. Better to stop asking questions." I stared at him, the deep lines of his old, tired face growing more pronounced. "My advice," he said before I could speak. "Leave this place, or at the very least, don't go toward the forest." With that, he tied off one of the bags and tucked it in a large satchel. He stood up and walked away. I must have sat on that stump for an hour, thinking over his words. Occasionally I would turn around and look across the river. The trees beyond seemed to absorb the light from the sun, and when I watched the forest, I could almost feel my vision warping and swirling together until the darkness grew across my eyes. After that, all I could hear was a muted droning noise, like an insect humming in the heat far away. But each time, I would snap out of the trance, unsure of how long I had spent watching the woods. The forest had a way of eating time when you gave it your attention. My feelings faded slightly when I looked away, and they were replaced by something else, an intense anger directed toward the forest across the river. It had influenced me, I was sure of it. It had been in my brain. If it could do it to me, it could have done it to her. It could be the cause of my wife's disappearance. I entered my house and exited moments later with a hunting rifle strapped across my back and a knife on my belt. I walked toward one of the boats on the shore and pushed it out into the water, jumping on it and starting the engine. I hesitated for a moment upon processing my actions, but I didn't change my mind. I had to know the truth about the forest. As the boat started across the river, I looked behind me. The hermit was watching me from afar. He shook his head slowly, but I pretended not to see him. The weight of the forest was undeniable by now. I had passed the area before on multiple occasions, but I had never felt its presence like this. The forest was deep and draped in moss so that I couldn't see what lay beyond it. When the boat drew closer, I heard a barely audible humming noise, and my vision warped again. I jumped slightly when the boat's side brushed against the root of a cypress tree, waking me up from my trance. I turned off the engine just as the boat approached the land. It slowed with a gentle thud and slid onto the muddy shore. I had reached the forest sooner than I had expected, almost as if I had been asleep during the short journey. The only sound was that of the tiny waves splashing against the metal side. I grabbed a rope and jumped off, tying the boat to a tree. The shore was covered in trees and steep banks that made it impossible to reach the forest. I walked along the shore, stepping on roots and rocks, and waiting for a place where the steep banks gave way slightly. As I walked, something caught my eye. It was shrouded in hanging moss below a huge cypress tree. I peered through the curtain of moss and confirmed my suspicion. It was a boat. The same boat that had been next to my house. The one my wife had disappeared with. There was no doubt in my mind that I was in the right place. My determination to discover what had happened to her grew, and so did my grip on the strap of the hunting rifle. I didn't know why I had taken the gun with me, but something told me it was important. The steep banks finally lowered, and I climbed onto the higher, dry forest floor. It wasn't nearly as dense as it had looked from the other side of the river, but the vines and moss hanging from the maple trees made it difficult to see deep within the woods. I didn't know where I was going or what I was looking for, but I pressed onward anyway. After walking forward for a while, I heard a loud rustle from the trees above me. I realized at that moment how tense my nerves had been. The faint sound had been enough to make me jump, and I forced myself to steady my breathing. Why was I so nervous? I heard the sound again, and when I looked up, the leaves and branches obscured my sight. "It's just a bird," I whispered to myself, "steady yourself." The second the words exited my mouth, I saw something in the underbrush. It looked like an old, decaying piece of leather. I walked over and picked it up, studying it closely. It was a boot. I put it down upon noting that it was too large to be my wife's. And besides, old shoes aren't that uncommon to find in places like that. But when I looked forward again, I saw another shoe. I scanned the ground to find another, and then more. The grass was dotted with shoes of all shapes and sizes. How odd. I heard the same rustling sound again, this time directly above me, but no matter how much I squinted against the light, I couldn't make out what was above the dense branches. I knew it was a bird, or a squirrel, or something of the sort, but my muscles still tensed, and I felt the urge to hold my gun in my hands. I shook the feeling and kept walking forward. The light of day was quickly dimming, and I made a mental note to leave soon after sunset. A